Today on the Shrewd podcast, we're going to talk about how people who attack politicians are getting off scot-free, which is insane in the United States. And speaking of insane, the United States is actually suggesting that we eat ourselves, literally, which we're going to cover that crazy story. We're also going to talk about how a recession is indeed coming and how Tim Pool has been hit hard by Twitter and all the crazy child grooming that is going on in the States. We're going to cover a couple studies about depression being kind of the source being a myth, and the FDA talking about how kids are getting some unexpected hits, and also how the WHO thinks monkeypox is a thing. It's not, just so you know. And finally, we're going to talk some Canadian stories about how Canada is pretty much screwed for the next generation, which sucks. But thankfully, some good news is coming. We have some big time court victories. We're going to love talking to you about that. All of that and more today on the Shrewd Dudes podcast.
Okay. It's another Tuesday news day that we are bringing you back from the abyss.
It is on!
It is on. Took Thursday off, and I'll give a brief description about that. Past few days for me have been off the wall.
Wait, you're going to give him a brief description? Wow,
I'll try.
That'll be a novelty.
But before we go into any of that, how was your weekend, and why were you absent on Thursday?
Well, Thursday my mom desperately needed somebody to go with her to a mariachi show, and this is not just any mariachi. This is the premier Olympics of mariachis band. These guys were freaking phenomenal. That guy could hold a note for almost a minute. Dang. You're sitting there watching. You're like, how are you doing this? It was impressive. These guys are the real deal. It was pretty amazing. And then I also got to go to Festival, which is the Mexican festival here in Calgary, which was awesome.
Not how you say that
Latin
word.
Fest.
Festival.
Oh, whatever. You're not even Latino. You can't even say
know.
it. Festival!
I am white, but I can still say it better than you.
That's cultural appropriation, sir. And then Saturday, man, I almost died. I felt like I was going to die.
Yes.
8 hours of biking in the mountains, and I was shown up by an old lady, by a grandmother. Yeah. I was like, dang, I need to up my game. It was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy weekend, though. How about you, man? How about you?
Okay. Thursday. Got reamed out on site, basically being called a child and an idiot. And our crew had to file 2 hours of reporting. And so I was not in the mood to do the show, and there wasn't a whole lot of stories to cover. So I was like, just don't have the effort. My heart was not in it. Friday was pretty calm. Saturday went to the zoo with the kids. Sunday, I fixed my car and managed to avoid all the pitfalls of breaking tiny pieces of plastic that would have cost me hundreds and hundreds to fix.
Steven basically became a mechanic. A do-it-yourself mechanic.
I've fixed a lot of things on my car.
Well done.
I'm bad with anything involving brakes, but anything under the hood, I'm actually pretty decent.
Well done.
I can't take apart an engine.
Well, that takes a lot more skill. Yeah.
Yeah. Or do anything electrical. But yeah, I know how to do basic stuff.
Of, many things that you can't do.
Yeah, I know how to do basic stuff. And then Monday, nothing really happened at all, really. Tuesday, today, I got sent home at 9 o'clock because my crew, half of it, is having what I would call a domestic.
A spat.
A spat, because they all live together. And now two of them hate each other and are almost getting to blows. And they were just, nope, they're too emotionally pent up and riled up to work. And so it was oh boy, I'm sitting on site for an hour doing jack all, and I get a call from my boss, and it's go home. I'll pay you for 3 hours. Just go home. And I'm like, okay, I'll go home. So yeah, busy, insane, all over the place.
It's all over.
My life lately. But
Like, you're fired. You're fired.
yeah, my life was basically like this first story, Lee Zeldin. Just crazy insanity. Yeah, a gong show. But Lee Zeldin probably took it better than I would have. Lee Zeldin, attacker, quickly released from jail, just as... I don't know why it says poll predicted, but it's just as Lee Zeldin.
Police? Does that mean police predicted?
Well, but it says here just as Zeldin predicted, so...
Okay.
The man who allegedly tried to stab Republican candidate for New York Governor Lee Zeldin with a bladed weapon during a campaign stop on Thursday was released from jail within hours of his arrest on a felony charge, just as Zeldin had predicted. David Jakubonis from Fairport, New York, was arraigned overnight in Parentown Town Court on counts of second-degree attempted assault. I would call that second-degree attempted murder, because it's a bladed weapon. Stemming, and, like, clearly, if you're taking a bladed weapon, like, this is first degree. This is premeditated.
Yep.
Like, what's going on in New York? This is messed up. Stemming from the attack, but was quickly released on his own recognizance. In a tweet after the violent incident, Zeldin, who is running as a tough-on-crime candidate against incumbent Democratic Kathy Hochul, who was awful, said he expected his alleged assailant to be back on the streets in no time. His words as he tried to stab me for a few hours ago were, "You're done." But several attendees, including Esposito for New York, quickly jumped into action and tackled the guy, the gubernatorial hopeful tweeted early Friday. Law enforcement was on the scene within minutes. The attacker will likely be instantly released under New York's laws.
Yeah, look at the actual. If you look at the photograph a little farther down.
Well, is this is? I'm assuming this is the blade.
No, go down further. Go down further. Now keep going. That's why they tackled him. But then if you go down here.
Yeah, he gets pretty close to his face.
It's a stabbing weapon. Yeah, I mean,
well, it's like a punching weapon with blades at the end.
Or you stab somebody with that in the neck. That's a like a fatal blow. Actually, I looked a little farther down in the story, and they actually showed what the actual thing is. I think it's like a. Where was the picture?
Oh, there. Oh, yeah, it's like a type of brass knuckles.
Yeah, it looks like a cat basically, but it's metal.
Yeah.
So obviously it does have the ability to cut you and all that. Why was this story important? It's because New York has become an absolutely this like massive dystopia.
Crazy, stupid place.
Well, the problem is that it's become a haven for criminals because criminals, like hardened criminals, get like given like the soft treatment. And then there was that story that happened not that long ago of a shopkeeper in a New York shop
who defended himself against the two who were trying to kill him.
Yeah, this guy was literally attacking him. And of course, if you're being attacked, you're an older person getting attacked by a younger person. You don't know what their intentions are. Maybe their intentions isn't even to kill you, but they could if they do the wrong thing. That could be like your end. So of course you're going to defend yourself. And they tried to railroad him. So it's a story showing two things. Yep. One, it shows how New York, and like it's a great example of Democratic policy. It's gone like totally awry. It shows how the Democrats are actually encouraging fanatics to go out and like do these kind of crazy things, and they're going to be covered, of course, by the media. No one's going to cover it. And then second, it shows how New York and their Democratic policies are creating the chaos and mayhem and the horrible situation that New York is in. They're basically making it life better for criminals so that like criminals can get away with just about anything, and you're encouraging crime, and average citizens are being thrown under the bus. By the way, if you wonder, Canada's doing the same thing. Trudeau's doing the same thing here. It's almost like it's planned. Almost like somebody's reading the crib notes, like Mr. Bean, like looking over, he's like, no. Kind of like that. That's right.
Yep.
So New York is a mess, and they're pretty much eating themselves alive over there. It's terrible.
But that's a force. That's kind of foreplanning for stuff that's going on with Walmart and food shortages. So Walmart cut its profit outlook. Oh, that's okay. Well, I figured it worked better this way. So here's why that might worry rivals. The nation's largest retailer said the rampant rise in prices is changing consumer habits, causing an inventory pileup and aggressive markdowns. Walmart sounded alarms on Monday when it slashed its quarterly and full-year profit forecasts, a warning that so rattled Wall Street.
Wall Street. It's like new kind of roadway now.
Exactly.
Pretty impressive.
So the retailer's stock went into a nosedive. Household spending has been resilient, even in the face of other economic challenges, including scrambled energy markets, supply chain bottlenecks, and decades-high inflation, amongst others, because consumers power more than 2/3 of the economy. That willingness to spend has been up as the key counterpoint to sentiments that the nation is barreling towards recession. But the message from the nation's largest retailer chain spells trouble, as it is a sure sign that stubbornly high prices are changing how people spend. Besides the hits to its bottom line, the shift leads more inventory gathering dust on store shelves and in warehouses that motivates the retailer to aggressively mark down merchandise that customers may no longer want or can't afford. Once more, Walmart's story is a harbinger for other retailers in the broader economy. So, people are spending more on like high need items, and because of that, they're spending less on frivolities.
So, Stephen,
yes,
tell us why this is important. Like, why is this a marker of what's going on?
Well,
people
have to spend money on food. You have to spend money on food because, of course, you have to feed yourself.
Yeah.
But as it costs more and more to feed yourself, those in lower income brackets are not going to be able to feed themselves. Mm-hmm. And so you have to look to alternative forms of fuel, alternative forms of food. We talked a few weeks ago about how kind of the establishments and the media are really pushing the idea that we should be eating bugs. But the New York Times takes it one step further.
Whoa. Before you move on.
Really?
Yes, sorry. I was hoping that you would cover this, but so one reason why this like what, you a lefty now, getting all offended? Oh my goodness!
No,
gosh.
I'm treating you as the triggered one.
Well, I mean, like the reason this story is important also is because so we're not really covering it right now, but this has been a big thing over the last week. Biden and the White House have been gaslighting Americans, telling them, "Don't worry,
we're not in a recession.
No recession. That doesn't even exist." They're actually trying to use new language.
Yeah.
Trying to say like, "Oh,
they changed their website.
This is a economic slowing, but it's not a recession.
Yeah, it's
like
not
there's not
a
a recession. It's not."
Yeah.
And so now Ben Shapiro talked about it this morning. I remember he had a really good take on it. He said that one of the things that the Biden White House trying to tell people is that, by the way, it's not a recession because look at the job numbers. Our unemployment is really low. With people are like really well off. And he said that is incredibly deceptive because jobs tend to be the last thing to go when you're heading into a recession, because the recession has to hit hard, and until the employers and all the companies feel the pinch, they're gonna try to avoid losing or firing employees. So, like using employees or like unemployment as a measure of how great the economy is doing is terrible, because that is literally the it's like the Titanic.
Mm-hmm.
You're like being told like, oh, the Titanic's not sinking because nobody's getting into life rafts. Like, well, yes, life rafts are the last thing that will start happening. People will start like running to the life rafts once the ship it's pretty much bottoming out. And so the Walmart story is one of many markers that demonstrate that if a major retailer is seeing the signs of economic slowdown, where people are now no longer buying the extras, they're just buying the essentials. If Walmart can see the writing on the wall, that should tell us that we're either in a recession or like literally like barreling straight through it. So I think Canada's in the same boat. We're going to be heading into a one heck of a recession in the coming years. So brace yourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can think, Steven.
Things are going to be bad. But as I was saying, People will be looking
Saying.
for alternative sources of energy, sources of fuel, sources of protein. And the New York Times suggests people. Soylent Green is people.
I was so gonna say Soylent Green. That was like it's so delicious.
Now, we're at that stage now. So the New York Times, a taste for cannibalism. The nice Chianti. A spate of recent stomach-churning books, TV shows, and films suggest we've never looked so delicious to one another.
Was it wasn't there a show called Chuck? Was it Chuck, the one about that serial killer who
Dexter.
actually Dexter? Thank you.
Chuck
Dexter.
was the one about the guy who had like the CIA database in his brain. It was really nerdy, and I found it fairly entertaining.
Interesting. Okay.
Yep. It also had one of my favorite actors in it. So, an image came to Chelsea G. Summers, a boyfriend, accidentally on purpose. What?
Accidentally on purpose.
Hit by a car. Some quick works with a corkscrew and his liver served Tuscan style on toast. That figment of her twisted imagination is what prompted Smith Summers to write a novel, A Certain Hunger, about a restaurant critic with a taste for male human flesh. Turns out cannibalism has a time and place. In the pages of some recent stomach-churning books and on television and film screens, Miss Summers and others suggest that time is now. There's Yellow Jackets, a Showtime series about a high school women's soccer team stranded in the woods for a few months too long, which premiered in November. The film Fresh, released on Hulu in March, involved an underground human meat trade for the rich. La Vona, a novel published in June, portrays cannibalism in a medieval village overcome by plague and drought. There's another book from Augustina Bazterrica, Tender is the Flesh.
There's way too many things on this.
Yeah, it just goes on and on and on.
It's quite sad.
Yeah. So, can you stomach it? A fascination with cannibalism, perhaps not surprisingly, can toe a fine line, as Miss Summers learns while writing A Certain Hunger. When fact-checkers come calling about the frenzied scenes in which the book's anti-heroine prepares her murdered lovers with grotesque Epicurean flourish, their queries about the intricacies of human butchery left Miss Summers so disturbed she went full raw vegan for 2 weeks. She was horrified by her own monster. Yeah. Like, this is... I know that they're like, oh, like, haha, we're talking about eating people lately. But, yeah, people are actually talking about this. People are actually seeing, and it's like, well, there's too many people, and we haven't convinced them to eat the bugs, so maybe we'll convince them to eat their neighbors.
Or their children.
Or their children.
Whoever,
well,
like next door.
They're already sacrificing their children, so extra protein.
That's not much, much of a big step.
Nope. It's like, well, it's already there.
Well, the funny thing about this is that, cannibalism historically has always been seen as the last ditch resort of desperate people. Like if you remember that movie, is it called Alive? That like plane crash.
Yeah.
People like crashed in the plane and they had to eat each other to survive, like because they had no other option. Also in the Bible, they talks about God, saying I'm going to punish the kingdom of Judah, and you're basically going to be so desperate for food, starving to death, that you're going to actually eat each other because that is going to be your only viable option for food. So this desperation and the fact that they're talking about this as it's like, oh, let's remove the stigma. It's like, no, maybe we should keep that giant sign
that stigma
of right there, because that is
it's like the few things which are remaining to have the stigma, which we've been saying, it's like, well, this should stay stigmatized for a very long time, always. And mainstream culture has said, oh no, we're not going to destigmatize these things. We're not going to destigmatize pedophilia. We're not going to destigmatize cannibalism. And it's like, well, both of them are quickly moving towards destigmatization. There was a CNN reporter who ate human brains live on air.
Oh, and remember the environment minister for Trudeau, was no longer Climate Barbie? She actually was on a show eating human flesh and all that kind of stuff on something. I forget what it was, but she got some pretty serious flack for that.
Yeah, she did.
The other place I just remembered that I've seen, they're putting this cannibalism in everywhere, is on Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Yep.
Where Jake befriends a guy.
The cannibal, yeah.
The
friend
guy
of the cannibal.
Finally, Cannibal, he basically talks about like eating children. It's like, oh my god! It's like, why are they making light of this? It's so terrible.
He's like, I could go for a nice burrito. And he's like, man, you know, be race now. Be like, a man burrito, and he's like, no, like a beef burrito. I don't only think about eating people, but dang, his thigh looks nice. And it's like, stop it, man, stop it.
It's like, man, my cousin was tasty. Like, why?
No,
why'd
no.
you have to go there? Why'd you have to go there?
Well, somebody who went there a long time ago, because he predicted all this stuff, and people have been calling him a conspiracy theorist for years, but I think by now it's official that he's been pretty much vindicated in almost everything. So here is a compilation of Alex Jones singing about eating people. It's exceptionally entertaining. Check it out.
Very glorious.
Your leftist ass like corn on the cob. I'm ready. I will eat your ass. Your leftist ass like corn on the cob. I'm ready. I will eat you. I will eat your ass. My children aren't going hungry. I'll do it. I'll drink your blood. And I'm starting to think about having to eat my neighbors. You think I like size it up? I'm gonna haul him up back chain. Chop his ass up, size it up. I'm gonna haul him up back chain. Chop, 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 chop. I will eat your leftist ass like corn on the cob. I'm ready.
Boy.
It goes on for another minute.
Considering that leftists tend to be like the on the plumper side of things, that is not the. I mean, he's not wrong. Like they do have a lot more fatty tissues. It's like eating human bacon. It's like nothing but bacon.
Yeah. Oh man, I hadn't even seen this before. I think this has been out for like 2 years, but I saw this because my wife was watching the comments section with Brett Cooper, and I'm like, this is a thing. Oh my gosh, this is hilarious. I'm ready.
Well done. Like corn on the cob.
Yeah, I will not eat you. I am not going to eat people. No eating people.
Unless we have a nice Chianti and some fava.
Shut up. I'm not eating people. It's not happening. You can try and creep me out like Hannibal. Well, not work.
It's like, it's all right, Clarice. So, speaking of somebody that got absolutely wrecked by the media.
Oh.
Talk about Cannibal.
Well, I wouldn't say he got absolutely wrecked by the media, but he got shut down by big tech.
He's constantly getting targeted. Last week he was featured in a January 6th video that basically tried to imply that he was one of the people that called for people to go get rowdy down in the Capitol.
Yes.
And yeah, the media's really going hard on him.
Yeah.
On Tim Pool.
Oh, they are, and it's totally undeserved. Yep. Tim Pool is quite rational. He's about as lefty as I get most of the time.
Yeah.
But
he's definitely a centrist.
Oh, he's definitely a centrist. He's not but it's been moving. The Overton window has been moving to the left. So Tim Pool, we welcome you into our ranks of conservatism. Join us. You know you want to. Seamus will welcome you with open arms.
Yes, he will. Yes,
so will we. Have us on higher up.
That was the biggest loss. Seriously, the show has not been the same.
I know.
Without Seamus, like Ian needs a counterbalance. Ian's a bit too pessimistic and a little bit too cringe. But anyways, so Tim Pool, he basically got he got suspended, didn't he? They locked him out of his account.
Yes.
For criticizing groomers.
Yes.
And if I remember correctly, what happened was he made a tweet, which is on the screen there. It says Twitter actively protects and supports pedophilia. And then he actually doubled down and actually provided several examples, actual articles that demonstrate that Twitter is actively covering for all sorts of pedophilic incidents and behaviors on their site. And as a result, they basically said yeah, you're done, son. And the best part, he doesn't even care.
No,
he thinks Twitter is a joke. Anyways, he doesn't even find it that useful and all that. So
Twitter is a joke. Twitter is a joke. Yep. There's so much that Twitter has been doing wrong, and of course we've covered it from the Project Veritas information, the bots leakage, the change in account follower numbers that happened right after Elon said that he was looking into buying the platform. Twitter is easily one of the most broken platforms. I'm not saying that any of the others are any better. Like, Facebook banned me for 3 days over the weekend. Facebook banned me because I was making an apt comparison to pro-choicers, saying, so, and I was comparing, of course, because they were justifying abortion in the case of rape. And I said, and I quote, so if you assault me, it's okay for me to kill your kid. And I literally said in the bottom of the comments, this is the justification you're using here. Mm-hmm. And that one comment got me a 3-day suspension for inciting violence. And I'm like, Facebook, you are corrupt and inept. I have no other words. Well, you are corrupt and inept.
Yeah. Facebook is becoming more and more censorious. The other thing, I don't know if you saw this, Stephen. So somebody posted this, I think this morning. There's a hashtag that was trending on Facebook that got shut down because of the implications. The hashtag here, I have it here. It's the hashtag died suddenly. Okay. Now, what do you think? What do you think died suddenly would be in reference to? What would they be trying to draw attention to? There you go. Like a little stroke, a little heart attack, or whatever happens, and all that. Basically, the implication is that all these mysterious deaths may have a single cause that we're trying to draw attention to, and Facebook decided, like, oh, we're going to shut this down because we can't have people like making connections. Yeah, that just can't happen. And so it's become, so Facebook, Twitter, they're becoming like, an absolute like nightmare.
Oh yeah, like, Facebook and Twitter, and of course TikTok. But first, I'm going to finish off with this. So some of the headlines before he had his account locked out, shared by Pool, include: Twitter lets pedophiles discuss their sexual attraction to minors. Scholars argue. Twitter is not placing sex offender notices on profiles. Twitter is accused of letting pedophiles discuss their sexual attraction to children, and Twitter is a breeding ground for the normalization of pedophilia. Unfortunately, it's not just Twitter. This is another article from the Post Millennial. A child rapist who groomed kids over the internet is now asking for pen pals via TikTok.
This was so terrible.
Oh, it's messed up. So Mariah Van Lith, a 43-year-old child rapist, has posted a TikTok video online asking for people to reach out to her if they would like to talk and become pen pals. TikTok reportedly has 18 million users that are 14 years old or younger. According to the Idaho Statesman, she ended her 15-second video by blowing a kiss to the camera. The TikTok went online on July 8th, and by Friday had gone viral, accumulating 3.7 million views. She made the video from behind the walls of the South Idaho Correctional Institute near Boise. She's serving 10 years in prison for raping 2 teenagers that she groomed over the internet, and she had used Snapchat and Facebook to connect with the boys and then lure them into physical encounters. I made big mistakes. That doesn't define who I am. I've learned and grown a lot. I'm starting a new chapter in my life. But then, what did she actually say? Yeah.
She basically, like, here she is talking about, I'm a changed person. You can't define me by my past.
Yep, but I'd like to talk with pen pals.
Thing. Dear God.
Yeah.
Well, like, this person basically bypassed, so that she can't actually post directly on TikTok from prison. But
she sent the video to someone else who posted it online for her.
And basically the what do you call it? The prison and whatever, whoever's in charge of inmates and all that. So like, well, nothing we can do here. You know? Like
it's like if she's making these videos, and like this isn't the first video that she's made.
Yep.
She's made a total of 8 videos and has 33,000 TikTok followers. Like it should have been once it was discovered that she was filming these videos and sending them out, and it was being posted on TikTok, immediately taking away phone privileges.
And not to mention, like, I mean, here, let me put a little context here. Imagine if a prisoner, a hardened prisoner who's a child rapist, or like not even a child rapist, just a felon goes on TikTok and tries and invites, hey, any children, any underage children want to be a pen pal, come, send me a message. That itself would be grounds for like serious repercussions, because you're basically, what's it called? You're luring. You're trying to lure children, and you're already a criminal. That's already messed up enough. But this person is a child rapist, a convicted child rapist who's even denying it, and they're doing the exact same thing, and everyone's okay with this. She actually got, what was this here? 500 people reached out.
Yep.
500 people. That should be a massive red flag, but this is the kind of stuff that TikTok and Twitter are more than happy to allow in the platforms.
And the big tech platforms, they're all for censoring any valid information. Like, we know we've had our channel on YouTube taken down twice. Yep. We've had Facebook flag our groups more times than we can even think to count.
Yeah.
And now YouTube is getting more and more bold about it.
Yeah. And
YouTube is going to now start censoring misinformation on abortion.
No boy.
So we'll begin removing content that spreads misinformation about abortion safety or gives instructions for unsafe abortion procedures. So we'll launch an information panel. It will attach to videos to provide context about abortions from local and global health authorities on videos discussing abortion. Their press account said the company relies on published guidance from health authorities as users upload videos and discuss abortion in the wake of the Supreme Court's ruling last month that overturned the nearly 50-year-old constitutional... There is none. Oh, the Hill. Come on. We prioritize connecting people to content from authoritative sources. That's your main primary error there. Authoritative sources on health topics. And we continuously review our policies and products as real-world events unfold. It already has misinformation policies in place for COVID-19, elections, and vaccines, as it seeks to curb the spread of harmful content and disinformation. Guess what? YouTube is harmful content and disinformation.
And we all know how well that has gone, because
it's gone so well.
Their crackdown on the election integrity has been a disaster. Their crackdown on COVID has been an absolute mess. Their crackdown on everything, and here they're like it's the same old story. It's like the biggest liars and the biggest offenders of misinformation and lies and censorship are the ones that are going to police. It's like think of it like, imagine if you're you're in a kindergarten class and the teacher says by the way, kids, we have a very big rule about not screaming in class. But guess what? All the white kids, they scream and they get punished immediately. But all the black kids and the Hispanic kids, they scream all they want and they don't get punished. Yeah. That's basically Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
They have supposed laws, but they only enforce them in one direction. Yeah. And that, funny enough, is what Tim Pool challenged back then.
Twitter with.
Yeah, Twitter with with the Jack Dorsey and his lawyer lady or whatever. He was pushing on him. He's like, you're enforcing one direction.
Yep.
And he's right. So
every time I think of all of this stuff, I think back a few months to one special Timcast IRL when he had a leftist on, and the one leftist is like big tech censorship. They're censoring liberals and leftists more than conservatives. And Tim just looks at it. You are wrong. Yeah, he is wrong. Thank you for saying it so bluntly, because he needed it. Yep. That guy was a fool.
Yep. Yes, he was.
I'm glad that he came on, because it's good to get a perspective. And we've invited so many people, because people are like, I could crush you, and we're like, come on then,
bring it.
Let's do it. I keep inviting people. There's a guy that continually tries to go after our Facebook page.
Okay.
And I'm like, whatever, dude. Come on, let's do it. You got a big talk. Let's do this. We'll dedicate an entire episode to you. We'll do it. And no, he's like, why would I talk to two misogynists? And I'm like, because well, if you don't, then you're a coward. So.
You probably get banned by Twitter for Facebook for saying that, because you know how they are.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, It's interesting what YouTube bans about. Like, I totally understand because it's recommending something that's unsafe. Making your own abortion pills, yes, that's unsafe. It's like, oh yes, let's totally make a medication. Let's have non-professionals make something. Well, it would be like they actually suggested for COVID for people to say, yep, you should eat horse paste.
And
YouTube would be right if people had said, go eat horse paste.
To be fair, yes, like blindly eating like any amount without any thought would be dangerous. But like horse paste, or at least like ivermectin, is ridiculously safer than whatever the concoctions are they're using for these like makeshift abortion kind of things.
Yes,
like they talk all the time about how like people will die because they will like go to back alleys and use coat hangers and like use chemicals. I'm like, and you're providing them with instructions on how to make these chemicals that may kill them.
Yep.
Who's the real culprit here? You know, like
you're providing them information on abortifacient.
They're freaking cannibals.
And then of course on the other side, it's like yes, like we'll start censoring content that talks about abortion, like misinformation on abortion safety. Guess what? Abortion is not safe. Abortion has never been safe. You think that abortion is a safe procedure because the government doesn't demand statistics. The government says it's optional to give reporting statistics. And of course, any investigation into what's actually going on at these abortion facilities like Planned Parenthood is attacked relentlessly. The amount of effort that they had to go through to go after absolute psychopaths like Gosnell is ludicrous. The fact that David DeLayden is still being pursued for millions by the state of California and the state of Texas because he had a false ID instead of going after Planned Parenthood for selling human body parts is nonsense.
Yeah. And then there was remember that story that came out like I think a few months ago.
Oh, about Washington.
In Washington D.C., all these dead babies that were obviously killed after being born or whatever.
Yeah, like
and
late,
the cops
like mid 30 weeks.
And the cops like they refused to investigate the actual crime. And
so they investigated the person that had them.
Yes,
they're like, oh yes, we discovered these fetal remains and she's illegally storing them, and it's like, what? She took them out of the freaking dumpster.
Say what then? It's like, this is the way that they work. There's a massive amount of corruption in these systems, and the people in charge are really working to protect those in power. That's really what happened in COVID too. Because COVID, the police were pretty much nothing more than the weaponized arm of the people who were abusing their power.
Yep.
That's pretty much what it was. So it just got really out of hand. So yeah, so this whole thing about YouTube promising that it will like remove misinformation, this is all a cover. It's just censorship, and it's only going to be one way.
It's nothing new.
Which is why you cannot trust the people that say they have your best interests at heart, like the Democrats on their same-sex marriage bill that they're trying to push through the Senate right now.
Good transition. Good transition.
Thank you.
All right. Republicans split on same-sex marriage bill, which faces uncertainty in the Senate.
Oh.
A bill to codify federal protections for same-sex marriage passed the House, but Senate Republicans are agonizing over whether they should block it or allow it to pass, with Democrats seeking to portray Republicans as belonging to a retrograde and primitive party that wants to strip away modern rights. Their decision could play a role in the midterm elections this fall. Some GOP strategists want the party to move past the issue by codifying protections, but that risks upsetting their cultural conservatives, which make up a significant portion of the party's base. A Gallup poll released last month found that most Americans, 71%, favor legal same-sex marriage. This puts Republicans.
This is written by NBC.
Oh yes. Well, I'm like, I looked at that Gallup poll. I'm you tell me. There was been an upward trend. When did it pass 50%?
I'm guessing after Obergefell.
Exactly at the time of Obergefell.
Yep, because the country was split right down the middle.
Yep.
Yeah, it was actually like Obergefell was not like a popular thing at the
No.
time. But
Well,
it's
it wouldn't have even passed Congress, and Congress has been Democrat controlled for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But like how many there? It didn't have total support. It had total support amongst the Democrats, but it did not have total support amongst the Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, most Republicans dislike the idea of giving the Democrats a win, even on an issue where there is, quote, consensus in the general public. 70% is not consensus.
I'm sorry, it's not consensus. But here's really what's going on. The Democrats are going to get absolutely annihilated in the fall.
Oh,
Right? They're going to be destroyed. We've talked about this a lot. There's going to be a red tsunami, and most likely is going to be bigger than even people believe, because most polls are
5% in the wrong direction.
So it's likely going to be the other way. So, also, the Democrats have realized that they are deadlocked because they can't get a lot of things through the Senate because of Manchin and Kristen Sinema, who are pretty much blocking a lot of their stuff, and all of the popular things that they want to do they're dying on. They're dying on inflation. They're dying on immigration. They're dying on foreign policy. They're dying on COVID. Like everything, they have no.
COVID is the only thing that the Democrats still have positive numbers on.
Yeah,
that's the only thing.
Yeah, even abortion is not a top issue for Americans. They actually did a poll. They found it was like less than 2% of Americans cared about abortion, where abortion was one of the big issues. Like no.
Which it's actually like surprising, because abortion should be, for the majority of evangelicals, for the majority of Christians, abortion should be like issue number 1 or issue number 2.
Yeah, should be up
like
there.
I don't. To be completely frank, I don't care if the economy is crumbling if we're not killing kids.
Yeah,
I will take not butchering 1 million kids a year if the economy drops 10 points.
Yeah,
I'll take that.
It's cloudy with the chance of genocide out there.
Exactly. It's like you choose saving human life. Yes, the economy dwindling will have a negative effect on human life, but let's save the bigger number in the short term, and then we can move and say, all right, let's focus on the economy now that we've outlawed genocide.
Yeah. The problem with the same-sex marriage bill, of course, like the name was so stupid when I remember hearing it. You remember what the name was? That was the Respect for Marriage Act.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, duh, give me a break. It's so cringe. Anyway, but what the Democrats are doing, they're trying to push an issue that they want to. This is the problem with Republicans. There's also the problem with conservatives in Canada. Is that there's the stigma. It's like, wait, you're not against same-sex marriage, are you? Like there's like the stigma, and people who are like most Republicans, a lot of conservatives, they're like, no, not me. I'm a good person.
I'm never going to ban that. I'm never going to go after that. It made this massive stir when Ted Cruz was on his show, which was Verdict, and said, Obergefell was wrongly decided. And liberals went crazy after him for it, but he wasn't wrong. Obergefell was a wrongly decided decision because there is no right to same-sex marriage, to homosexual marriage in the Constitution, just like there is no right to an abortion in the Constitution. Like, if you, of course, codified it, like they're trying to do now, and make an amendment to the Constitution, that's one thing. But saying, nope, we're just going to have the Supreme Court pass it on what they believe to be, like, writing it in. I forget what the term is for that, but yes. There's a special word for writing it into for assuming it's like, well, like, they would have written it in had it been written now. It's like, that's not how that works.
No, I mean, the thing is, like, the Democrats always, if they can't get what they want through just sheer power, they'll try to cheat. Yeah, see, it's power is all they care about. So
now, before we move on from here, like, I actually have had a suggestion. Like, when it comes to marriage, same-sex unions, I'm like, let's further separate the decision between civil unions that are decided by the state and marriage. Because marriage has always been, since the inception of human civilization, marriage has always been something that has been governed over by the religious bodies.
Yeah. I mean, it's recognized by every major community and every major group. Like even the Native Americans, like, smaller tribes, they have marriage as well.
They did.
But now, the way I always because people talk about like, well, what's the difference? They're all the same. Like, if you love each other, I'm like, no. There's two major components that I believe make up make a valid marriage. It's a definition issue. They want to redefine marriage to include all sorts of things, and now everything becomes marriage, right? But here's the two crucial aspects of marriage that make up marriage. One, marriage has to be purposeful.
Yep.
There has to be a purpose outside of yourself. In other words, if two people get together, the purpose is to be able to create children. Now, you think there's couples that can't have children. Yes, that's not to their own fault.
Yeah.
Okay?
But if they go in saying we're both going to be infertile and we're just going to have a union and we're never going to have children, then no.
I say that marriage is invalid because it's not, the marriage is not purposeful. It's the only purpose, or it's not, doesn't have
the only purpose is pleasure.
Well, the purpose is self-serving.
Yeah,
it's we want to be ourselves happy, and we want to reap the benefits of tax, all these things. But you're not contributing to society because you're not producing offspring, which is one purpose of marriage. The second purpose of marriage that should be part of the equation is that even for couples that can't have children, the couple could still raise children because you have a mother and a father, which is two of the most important components of a healthy family. Yeah, you need a father and a mother, and so even parents that cannot have children can still raise other children and still provide all that kind of stuff. That's why grandparents, when parents die, grandparents are perfectly capable of raising the children if the couple dies or things like that.
Yeah,
there's a reason why this was in the government's best interest to protect and to create an incentive so that people will do it, because this is the foundation of a healthy society. You cannot have healthy children if you like this. The problem is homosexual relationships. They can't make children; they have to be given children. And second, they're depriving children of a massively vital ingredient, which is a mother and a father. You're depriving them of either a mother or you're depriving them of a father.
Yes,
you're codifying something that's harmful. So this is why same-sex couples can have relationships, and I get it. You want to create a society where those are okay, but that's not the same as a marriage.
No,
because those relationships are not a blessing to society.
We're on the same point here. We're on the same point here. Well, yeah, because I was like, all right, religious institutions, marriage, state issued, and both have the same tax status.
Yeah.
Civil unions, marriage.
Yep.
Because you'll see a drastic difference.
Yeah. But
because
really what these couples want, the LGBT community, they want to have the cultural recognition.
Yes.
That we want you to make our union valid and equal, and we want everyone to believe it's the same, and this is why they strive so hard to push this.
Okay.
Go ahead, go for it.
No, I have no idea how to connect this. You do that because you.
Okay.
This is your story, and you wanted. To, I was like, all right, you wanted this right after it, so go for it, man.
All right. So, speaking of people in power and authority lying to you about what's best for you, this is the story that came out this past week, which is it was kind of a massive thing because this is a decades-long study that basically threw a gigantic nuclear bomb in the claim that depression is caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain. Okay,
so I'll read it out. Depression is likely not caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain, study says. Many people take antidepressants because they've been led to believe their depression has a biochemical cause, but new research suggests their belief is not grounded in evidence. So researchers from the University College London conducted an umbrella review of past meta-studies and systemic analyses of depression's relationship to serotonin. For years, what are you doing? Go away. Chemical imbalance of serotonin has been widely viewed as the culprit for depression, resulting in widespread use of antidepressants. Are you serious? The studies published this week in the journal Molecular Psychiatry concluded there is no clear evidence that serotonin levels or serotonin activity is responsible for depression. A recent review study is pushing back against the long-held views in medicine that depression is caused by a serotonin imbalance in the brain. Researchers from the University College in London conducted an umbrella review of past meta-studies and systemic analyses of depression's relationship to serotonin activity that included tens of thousands of participants. The study, published this week, concluded there's no clear evidence that serotonin levels or serotonin activity is responsible for depression. And of course, it's a neurotransmitter that plays a key role in governing mood, sleep, digestion, and of course, like regulating my emotions when dealing with that stupid video. If you're not watching, there's a video that has popped up like 5 times every time I scroll.
It's really annoying. Yeah, I don't do that. So why is this important? Because I remember in the 90s. I grew up in the 90s, and I remember hearing this all the time. That depression. Like they called it clinical depression. My friend, a good friend of mine, actually even used the word. They're like, well, there's some people who have clinical depression, and they need drugs to be able to kind of like get better and all that. And she was basing that on the notion that people are depressed because they have low serotonin. Serotonin is the drug that makes you happy, and so basically these drugs work by increasing the serotonin uptake of the brain, thus supposedly making you happier. However, these drugs have first of all, these drugs have gone so incredibly out of control prescribed that like millions and millions of people have taken these things, usually because a doctor has told them, oh, you need to go on antidepressants, oh, you need to go on these drugs. They're popping them out like they're Tic Tacs, and so it's an epidemic. Secondly, these things are super dangerous, and there are some very serious side effects that come with all these drugs, including the fact that many of them actually increase your desire to commit suicide, which is crazy. Oh, well, you're really depressed. We're going to give you this drug that might want to make you very suicidal. It's like,
very suicidal.
No thanks. I'm good. I'd prefer not to be suicidal. But yeah, it's I don't know if it was like Matt Walsh. Somebody showed a video of Tom Cruise of all people, who actually pointed this out in 2005.
Yeah.
And he actually was right. He was like,
he
was right. He was right. These people are like a bunch of like crooks, and they're trying to sell you drugs and trying to like whittle the problem down to a single thing. So obviously I recommend that you read the study. I thought it was a big deal because of all the studies that you and I have gone through, so many studies, this is a biggie because it completely throws on its head everything we've been told for like decades now about like depression, and really like should make you think twice about taking depression drugs, because a lot of the promises are like, not only are there some real dangers to them, but also the whole premise of like how they work is based not on evidence but on a lot of speculation. So it was kind of a big deal, and I would definitely recommend you read the story.
Indeed.
Right, Stephen?
But
Stephen?
It was kind of an interlude.
You can do this. You can do it.
No, because like going back to talking about the Democrats and the Republicans in the House passing the same-sex marriage bill. Eventually, like we knew this would happen. We called this ages ago when the same-sex marriage passed in Canada in 2005, when Obergefell went down in 2013. We were saying, guess what? It's not going to stop with adults. They're going to move it to children. They're going to push harmful things on children. And nowadays, oh wonder of wonders, the FDA warns of brain swelling and permanent vision loss found in children taking puberty blockers. So they added a warning.
Not a big deal.
Yeah, they added a warning to gonadotropin-releasing hormones, GnRH, agonists, known to most as puberty blockers, having identified a serious potential side effect for some that may cause a dangerous surge of spinal fluid pressure in the brain that can cause headaches, nausea, double vision, and even permanent vision loss. They identified 6 cases in females ages 5 to 12 who were diagnosed with pseudotumor cerebri after taking GnRH. Pseudotumor cerebri, also known as idiopathic intracranial hypertension, literally means false brain tumor because the signs and symptoms in affected patients are similar to those of a large brain tumor. An FDA spokesperson said that during a review of the published literature for the clinical use of Lupron, which is mentioned in What is a Woman, all hail Matt Walsh, several research papers described the development of pseudotumor cerebri in children who have been treated with puberty blocker medication. This is from What is a Woman?
Yep.
Let's watch it.
I just spoke a month or two ago with a mother whose 14-year-old daughter was put on blockers. They discovered after 2 years, this 14-year-old girl has osteoporosis. That's something that like old women get.
How can doctors assure parents that a certain medicine is totally safe if, based on what you're saying, they can't possibly know that?
How can they be removing the healthy breasts of 15-year-old girls? How can they be sterilizing kids? How can this whole thing be happening, Matt?
Yep. How could this whole thing be happening?
It's insane because the whole push of the left right now is the ends justify the means always, and right now there's such a like in the past we used to like doctors used to be like at least somewhat legitimately like concerned and like out for your own good. Nowadays I can't even go to a regular doctor and trust that they're going to give me like good advice. I mean, like you heard, like like doctors have been prescribing antidepressants like Tic Tacs for ages, not realizing that they're basically like giving their patients all sorts of like brain altering drugs that have long term consequences.
Yep.
Puberty blockers are even worse, but it's so important that you cannot offend the wrong group or the wrong thing that it's becoming an epidemic. So it's frankly amazing to me how much the medical community has like officially put to rest the whole oath of what's that oath that every doctor has to take?
Hippocratic.
Yeah, there you go. Hippocratic oath, basically saying that you shall do no harm. Well, that's gone.
Yeah.
No doctor holds that anymore.
Oh yeah, like the
insane.
original Hippocratic oath. Do you know actually one of the first lines in the Hippocratic oath, the original one?
What's that?
Is I shall not give a woman a concoction that is meant to induce an abortion.
Really?
Yep. That is one of the very first lines in the original Greek.
Wow.
That's been ditched.
Yep, of course, because now it's like sacred in our society.
Oh yeah, sacred.
But now this next story I found interesting because the story is from the Counter Signal, and it talks about how the WHO has declared monkeypox an international health emergency. Now, the very interesting thing about this epidemic is that they want you to believe that every single person can catch this. That is like COVID. That like you can catch it just going to the supermarket. You can catch it talking to your best friend for coffee. And there's a hidden lie that they are not telling you in these stories that I want to see if they cover in the Counter Signals. Go for it.
Yeah. Well, I was going to introduce this story by saying, meanwhile, at the Legion of Doom, I mean the WHO.
Pretty much.
So yes, WHO declares monkeypox an international health emergency. So, speaking of the World Health,
I should have done it right.
I know.
That's better.
Well done. Speaking of the World Health Organization on Saturday, WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom made the announcement. A month ago, I convened an emergency committee under the international health regulations to assess whether the multi-country monkeypox outbreak represented a public health emergency of international concern. At that meeting, while differing views were expressed, the committee resolved by consensus that the outbreak did not represent a public health emergency of international concern. At the time, there were 3,040 cases of monkeypox that had been reported to the WHO from 47 countries. Since then, the outbreak has continued to grow. And now there are more than 16,000 reported cases from 75 countries and territories, and 5 deaths. In light of the evolving outbreak, I reconvened the committee on Thursday of this week to review the latest data and advise me accordingly. He continues saying the committee couldn't reach a consensus, but that ultimately he made the decision to declare monkeypox an international health emergency, even though he acknowledges the risk from monkeypox is moderate. Moderate?
Oh, good. So they're basically like they're deadlocked on this thing. He's like, I'm putting my fist down. It's an emergency, dang it. It's like, oh, good. One person decides for the whole world. Lovely. So I don't know if he actually goes into how it's. Did they go into how it spreads, dude?
I don't think they do.
Okay, so here's some of the things I found out about monkeypox.
Okay. So Danny,
go for it.
Danny.
Yeah, go for it.
So using those numbers,
Uh-huh.
how much more dangerous is COVID? So I would say right now, in the general population,
Uh-huh.
I would say 1 in 2,000 general risk from COVID. Give or take.
2,000?
Yeah. For like the entire age group.
Depending on your age.
Well, I'm saying across all age groups.
Oh, like I said, that's a general overall kind of risk factor.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, because when you factor in the elderly,
it's been going down. Like I would say at the start of COVID, it was about 1 in 1,000 because we didn't know how to treat it, and because the elderly were being like COVID cases were being thrown into the elderly nursing homes, and yada yada. And now it's decreased because we know more on how to treat it, and because
people have
it's
gotten
less
natural
deadly,
immunity.
and people have natural immunity, yada yada, all these things. And so now it's 1 in 2,000, and 1 in 2,000 is about 0.05%.
Yeah, like really, really small. Yeah.
Monkeypox, given the number 5 deaths
Yeah,
and 75,000 cases, is
It's down there.
0.00006.
It's down there.
And it's
but it's no. But it's even worse, Steven. It's even worse because unlike COVID, I could technically catch COVID from just about anybody.
Oh, I know.
Guess what? Unless
unless you're like licking blisters.
No, unless I am engaging in promiscuous homosexual sex, I am not getting monkeypox. That is the elephant in the room.
That is the elephant in the room. That is the majority of transfer of monkeypox. 95% is between homosexual sex that is promiscuous. And there was like a couple kids that. There was a couple kids in the United States, and the CDC was announcing on this, and they're like, "Yep, both are connected to like homosexual males who have been sleeping around." And it's like, then get those kids out of there.
Yeah, maybe you should remove them from that
from the home because that's an unsafe and unstable environment.
Not to mention that, like Michael Knowles was saying, was like, maybe we should really be thinking like, are these kids okay?
Yeah.
How did they get this? So like, okay, like now you have to wonder about how it spread. So ultimately, it's incredible to me that this is an actual disease. And they don't want to make it sound like this is a problem for the homosexual community because of the stigma.
Yep.
But really, what they're doing is they want to make it's exactly what they did with COVID. It's like everybody could die. Everybody's at risk.
It's a mass death casualty event.
And yet, if you are a young person, like a teenager or a child, who is like relatively healthy, has no like your health concerns or issues, you're not obese, your chances of dying from COVID are virtually
from COVID, yes. From COVID. Your chances, like a child, like those children, have a higher chance of dying than the adults.
Yeah, but their chances of getting it are much lower.
They're without them being in close proximity of those homosexual perverts, which is what they are, let's be honest, then they would never have any chance in the world of getting it. But guess what? When you live with deviants, you're going to catch deviant diseases.
Yeah, and the thing is, we don't know really what happened, considering how little confidence and how little trust we have in our health authorities, and how unreliable they are at investigating every crime equally. Like we saw in the story, the first story from that guy who attacked the Republican, governor.
Chico.
Yeah, he goes right back in the street because we can't mess with him because he's a criminal. He's a protected class, right? And they're not going to prosecute those kind of people. But this is a same example. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that these children got monkeypox because of the various things that happened. Do we really trust that our health authorities or anybody else are going to actually go and investigate? And even if they investigate, that they're not going to try to cover it up.
Give me a break.
It's just I just don't trust these people
to
do the right thing. So no, I legitimately wonder how these children got it. I'm hoping that they didn't get it from various, but either way,
my money is on minor attracted persons,
which is another dirty little secret of that community.
Pedophiles.
Oh, Tim Pool, you're so funny.
I know. But so they're calling monkeypox an international health emergency. The last time they called an international health emergency, it created the COVID-19 pandemic response, which is terrible. And now forensic reports are calling for criminal investigation into the responses, naming alleged perpetrations and outlining the crimes. A forensic report engineer urges police to initiate a criminal investigation into the COVID-19 response. So with over 40 years of experience as a professional engineer, Manitoba resident Ken Drysdale has compiled an 89-page report titled Investigation into Criminal Allegations Concerning COVID-19 Pandemic Response. He's had previous experience generating expert engineering reports that have been used in court cases, arbitration, insurance claims, etc. in both the public and private sectors. The report is specific to Manitoba, but others are being developed for each of the provinces and territories. Drysdale says that the report set out to look at government messaging to determine whether it was clear and or honest. It looks at statistics and compares 2019 to 2020. When referring to the breakdown of the statistical analysis, Drysdale notes that the totality of fraud was overwhelming. For instance, the ICU bed capacity in Manitoba has been a steady decline since 2006, while the population has continued to grow. In October of 2019... What?
We've said things like that before.
Well, we've said it for Alberta, but yeah. Manitoba had a mere 4 ICU beds per 100,000 population. This is in comparison to the United States, which has about 35 ICU beds per 100,000. Germany had 29. The average in Canada was 13.5, and we were down to about 4. But that's not all. It was worse than that. He said that the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority had only had staffing for 50% of the positions that they required in order to staff those beds. While citing the pandemic influenza plan, Drysdale said that throughout the COVID-19 pandemonium, the government did the exact opposite of what they developed in that 550-page document. He wanted to source raw government data to try and make sense of it all because experts will say anything depending on who's paying them. Using Stats Canada and the government of Manitoba's website, he used the information exactly as they presented it. We know there's lots of controversy about the testing, diagnostics, and who died of COVID or died with, but we didn't question it because he wanted to know were those numbers consistent with the risks that we took on, both as individuals and as a society? As it turns out, your chances of just dying were 10 times higher than your chances of dying of COVID. He says, while reiterating that those with 3 or more comorbidities made up 45% of all COVID-related deaths. And in Alberta, that was actually much higher. I believe those with 3 or more comorbidities in Alberta was 80%.
Yeah, it was crazy high.
So, we've known this for a long time. I'm glad that he's compiling this forensic report. It should be investigated, and those responsible for the lockdowns, those responsible for any sort of segregation, any sort of punishment of those who went against their dogma and protested, had church services, had opened their business against, anybody who is responsible for that should be charged, and there should be trials.
Yeah, so people are really aching to move on. They want to move on from COVID. They want to move on from. They just want to pretend that this never happened.
Yeah.
But the problem is that what our government actually engaged in was crimes against humanity.
Yep.
Legitimately, crimes against humanity in various different ways. People died, not because of the virus, but because of the government and what they did. And the lives were destroyed. People were wrecked. It was truly one of the most horrible things. And my biggest concern is that those responsible will not face any repercussions. Yeah. Now, thankfully, in Christianity, they will. But in the real world, we're not sure because a lot of these people are probably going to get away with the kind of destructive policies that they've done. And one of the worst will be our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau,
Prime Minister.
Our Prime Minister, who is hell-bent on destroying the country entirely.
Yep. Well, and as a result of his disastrous policies and his stupidity, well, not just his stupidity, his being evil, Canada set up to be the worst performing Western economy for decades. A study from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development is predicting that Canada will be the worst performing advanced economy over the coming decade, as well as for decades after. It offers insight on whether Canadians can look forward to meaningful gains in average living standards in the decades to come. The findings are dismal. The OECD predicts that Canada can at best achieve real per capita growth of only 0.7% per annum between 2020 and 2030. That places Canada dead last.
That's the scenario.
Yeah. Amongst 40 nations designated the world's advanced countries, they will wring their hands over. Economics will wring their hands over such data. Media will soften the blow on behalf of government. It's a worldwide trend, says the Financial Post. This may or may not be. CAP are concerned with a vital question never to be addressed by experts, journalists, or economists. Is the situation intentional or on part of the government? Oh, intentional on the part of the government. CAP has been around long enough to know that mainstream society will scoff at this suggestion. Those who religiously read the Globe and Mail consider this kind of talk so much conspiracy theorist lunacy. Due to neglect of a vital point, this may one day be proven wrong. The missing link comes in form of an agenda of political transformation. According to this theory, all liberal government decisions contain a common purpose as elements of a predetermined agenda to transform Canada from a democracy to a socialist state. Yeah. If the concept has validity, then the ruination of the economy will likely play a vital role in our national transition. If one objectively reviews the 7-year period since Justin Trudeau became Prime Minister, patterns emerge to add credence to our theory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So basically, they were talking about, speaking of Tim Pool, they were talking about it today, and they basically labeled it. They called it controlled demolition.
Yep.
Which is basically the concept that all these major nations from the Canada, US, UK, a lot of European countries and countries all over the world, they are actively working to destroy their own countries. Obviously, for a purpose, is to destroy what was there, so they want to do what they did in the French Revolution. The French Revolution basically destroyed the existing power structure and put up something else in this place. And they're hoping to, put up their own, vision of this fascist or socialist, utopia, that they'll be on top and serfs will serve them. Now, this whole idea it's crazy because, it may take you years to build a house and to make it nice and to really care for it, right? Let's say somebody builds a house from the ground up, like a wood house or whatever, and they work like crazy to keep it up, right? And then 1 year they have to go away, and somebody comes in and takes care of the house. It takes you almost no time to completely and totally trash that house.
Yeah.
It takes years to build it, and it takes a very short time to destroy everything there. That is what the Trudeau government has done, and sadly, even if Pierre Poilievre manages to come in and take over the government and take over Canada, unfortunately, he's going to inherit a giant mess, a dumpster fire that the Trudeau government has inherited. And sadly,
well, no, they inherited a small dumpster fire. They made it into a massive dumpster fire.
No, well, they inherited a fairly deep economy.
Yeah, they did. There were some minor issues in the economy. There were some minor issues in government. But they made a tiny little campfire, and they made it into a 3-block burning brawl.
Yeah. The Harper government actually was congratulated because they were one of the best performing economies after the.
They were the best in the G20.
Yeah, because Stephen Harper's an economist.
Yep.
That stuff, and so he knows how to maintain a good economy in the midst of massive recession. Justin Trudeau doesn't. And so even if he loses in this next election, he's just going to sit back and be like, look at him. The economy sucks and everything sucks and all these other things suck. And
it's the conservatives.
They're trying to cut money. They're cutting money. I was like, well, yes, because your out of control spending is insane. We have to cut costs.
Stopping me from spending money is racist and misogynistic, darling.
Yeah, pretty much actually. So it's actually quite depressing, the idea that Trudeau has not only managed the country terribly, but he's managed to pretty much make it so completely crippled that it'll take decades for Canada to recover. And so, if you're a Canadian, that is really terrible news for like the upcoming years.
Yep, it is. Ugh. It's really terrible news. And, you know, like the Pope coming was not terrible news. The residential schools were terrible news. But the Pope coming was not. Yeah. Well, the Pope is kind of a twit, but let's go on.
Well, I'm not a big fan of this Pope.
He's terrible. He's terrible. So Pope Francis begs for forgiveness over Canadian residential school system. So, speaking to an audience of First Nations elders and former residential school attendees in Massachusetts, Francis said, "I am sorry. I ask forgiveness in particular for the ways in which many members of the church and of religious communities cooperated, not least through their indifference and project of cultural destruction and forced assimilation promoted by the governments of that time, which accumulated in the system of residential schools." This isn't the first time Pope Francis apologized for the church's role in the Canadian residential schools, having done so earlier this year. However, despite the apology, many Indigenous activists said it wasn't good enough and wouldn't settle for anything less than an in-person apology. So far, he has not mentioned at least the 58 churches, many of which were Roman Catholic, that have been burnt down or experienced incidents of arson or vandalism by Indigenous activists and sympathizers across the country. Of those churches that were attacked, 17 of them have been scorched or burnt to a crisp in suspicious circumstances. Thus far, we've only been able to confirm one arrest concerning the church burnings, which was deemed to meet the criteria of a hate crime by police. The cases of arson against churches exploded last year in what appears to be explicit acts of retaliation after the discovery of unmarked graves near residential schools. Said graves were also used as Pope's motivation to visit and apologize. While those that committed the acts seem motivated by a sense of justice, many targeted churches have majority Indigenous or racialized minority congregations. These people say they're devastated to see their place of worship destroyed. "We are refugees with no means. We escaped from Vietnam to come here to get more freedom, to live and think of it as a good country. And now it happened to our church," Pastor Ty Nguyen told the countersignal after the Calgary Vietnamese Alliance Church was attacked. "Maybe it's not safe to be here in Canada compared to Vietnam."
Yeah, well, isn't that great?
Yeah.
Great thing to say.
And like we've talked about the residential schools. Like the residential school system, yeah, it was bad. It was an arrogant idea.
Yeah.
And it was explicitly anti-freedom.
Yeah, however, I will say this. I did listen to a very long interview. I think it was Lawrence Southern was interviewing a scholar who knew and studied residential schools. And one of the problems is that we've kind of like gone a little bit too far on the other side. Mm-hmm. Yes, I've read books, I've read testimonies. There are many schools all across the country that did some horrible things.
Yes.
And absolutely agree. However, there are also many of these schools that were absolutely fine, and
I was going to go there too.
Blessing. Yeah, they were a giant blessing to many natives and people in the communities.
Well, and I forget exactly what school it was. I think there's actually a school in Calgary named after one of these individuals that ran a school, and even after the government said no, we shouldn't have residential schools, they kept it open because the families were like, "You're doing a great job.
Yeah,
our kids are way better educated and way better raised by you than we could have raised them ourselves, and especially we could have raised them ourselves within the reservations."
Yeah. So all of this stuff goes my boss was asking me about this today. Pope's visit. He's like, "What do you think of the Pope?" I'm like, I used to like John Paul II,
yep.
the Pope. He was
great. Good Pope. Good
great.
Pope.
He was a great representative of the Catholic Church. Pope Benedict was not as
wishy-washy.
Wishy-washy, but he was actually theologically sound, which I liked about him. And then this Pope is a showman. He's all about external show of look how great I am. But theologically, he is an absolute he's almost an apostate theologically.
Yeah,
he's a really bad Pope for the church, and I'm not surprised that he's doing these kind of these virtue signaling kind of like things that he does. Loves it. Now, the problem with the residential school thing is that it's all based on a lie. And it's sad that not only the Pope, but the entire Canadian government is pretending like this is still a thing. Like, yes, like all these children were murdered, like in mass graves in Kamloops. Like, nope, that was a hoax. And that's been repeatedly shown to be a complete and total hoax. But they're doubling down. They're pretending like their fingers in their ears, pretend like they don't hear. Sadly, and I want to see if you agree with this, Stephen. No. I told my boss, the native people are to Canada what black people are to the U.S. It's basically the oppressed minority that we're responsible for causing them grave harm, and so there's this massive amount of white guilt, and we have to like do everything in our power to basically cater to them.
And of course, like
their victims.
The Canadian government has done pretty much everything that the far leftists in the United States have campaigned to do for blacks. They're like, oh, we need to pay reparations. Canadian government has paid hundreds, if not over $1 billion into the reserves in terms of welfare payouts, in terms of like funding and support. And there's very little accountability. Like many of these reserves do not have running water because they pay the band chief, and then the band chief's just like, why would I pay my citizens? Like, why would I get paid and I'm not held accountable by anybody. Yeah. And so as long as I'm still band chief, then I'm going to live in this glorious mansion and my people are not going to have running water and they're going to have boiling water advisories because I'm a complete dick. Yeah.
And the problem is like, it's exactly the same as the story we talked about earlier about the antidepressants. Yeah. The pharmaceutical companies try to whittle down depression to a single cause that can be solved by a pill. That's what they try to do. Whereas depression is a very complex thing that a lot of factors play into it, and you have to solve it like, multifaceted way. The problem with Native American or Native Aboriginal issues in Canada is that the amount of complexity of every single Native band across the country is so massive. Like there are bands in the West Coast that are far better off than bands in Saskatchewan, than bands in Ontario and wherever else. And every single band is different. Every reserve is different, has different policing, has different organizations. But ultimately, one of the problems that we see a lot is a lot of mismanagement. Yep. A lot of these are run like socialist government. And there's not a lot of responsibility. Like we have this view, all natives are victims, which is exactly what they try to say about the blacks in the United States. Like they're all victims, all of them. Yeah. And so the government's always responsible. So we have to help them out. And so it's sad. So it's kind of a sour visit for the Pope coming to Canada. Yep. But thankfully we have some good stories to finish up on.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
It's rare that we actually finish up on good stories.
Yeah.
But one of our friends, which I feel like we can call Pastor Art our friend, we have a good working relationship, especially with his brother David.
Yeah, we interviewed them both in one of the rallies.
Yeah, we did. Unfortunately, YouTube took down that footage and will not give me it back. Yep. So Pastor Art Pawlowski's contempt conviction set aside on appeal. The Alberta Court of Appeal ruled the injunction against him, his arrest, his jail time, the censorship order, and fines against him were illegal. The appeals court panel of Justice Barbara Leah Veldwee, I don't know, Justice Michelle Crichton, and Justice Joanna Struckoff ordered Alberta Health Services to reimburse Artur Pawlowski and his brother David for the cost of their appeal and the return of any fines and penalties paid. The appeals panel concluded the original injunction banning protest in the name of public health was not sufficiently clear and unambiguous. The appeals panel also reduced the penalties of restaurant owner Chris Scott to time served and penalties already paid.
Oh, that's not very good. I know that.
Yeah. So the judgment released Friday morning read, the Pawlowski's appeals are allowed. The finding of contempt and the sanction order are set aside. The fines that have been paid by them are to be reimbursed. The judge's chamber awarded costs to AHS payable by the Pawlowskis jointly in the amount of $15,000, calculated at 2.5 times column 1. This cost award is set aside, and the Pawlowskis are awarded their cost payable by AHS in the proceedings below, and this court calculated on the same basis. Calgary pastor Art Pawlowski and his brother David were both arrested and imprisoned after being found in contempt of an ex parte court order obtained by Alberta Health Services restraining illegal public gatherings. The original finding of contempt by Justice Adam Germain, our very first douche of the week.
No, he was such a politically
political
motivated
hack.
guy.
Included a sanction that required the Pavlovskis and Chris Scott, the owner of the Whistle Stop Cafe in Mirror, Alberta, also named in the first restraining order, to denounce themselves and their views on COVID before expressing their own opinions publicly. I am also aware the views I am expressing to you on this occasion, I'm going to say it in a voice, may not be views held by the majority of medical experts in Alberta. While I may disagree with them, I am obliged to inform you the majority of medical experts favor social distancing, mask wearing, and avoiding large crowds to reduce the spread of COVID-19.
Yeah, so unscientific.
Most medical experts also support participation in a vaccination program unless for a valid religious or medical reason you cannot be vaccinated. Vaccinations have been shown statistically to save lives and reduce the severity of COVID-19 symptoms.
They're all lies. My God.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was basically like that pamphlet, which it was funny because I actually, initially when we went over it, I didn't have one. I just found mine.
Oh, yeah. Did you?
Yeah, it showed up in my mailbox, and I'm like, did they send another one of these? And it's like, nope, October 2021. And I'm like,
Wow.
what?
A while back.
I'm like, dang, Canada Post. What the heck is going on?
little slow over there.
So this is really great news.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. It's not 100% perfect, especially considering Chris Scott.
It's years in the making.
Yeah, years in the making. And then, of course, further good news. Tamara Lich, Freedom Convoy organizer, to be released on bail. We've talked about her a few times in the past few weeks, with her being arrested and then released on bail and then arrested. So she'll be released from jail on bail after she was detained earlier in July for allegedly violating her previous bail conditions. Superior Court Justice Adam Goodman granted Lich another bail hearing after he ruled that the earlier order on July 8th for Lich's detainment was clearly inappropriate. She was rearrested after having contact, quote-unquote, with fellow protest leader Tom Marazzo at an awards gala in Toronto last month. The Crown argued that the contact violated Lich's bail conditions, as she had been ordered not to communicate with key convoy organizers except through counsel. On Monday...
Or the presence of counsel, which she was.
Yeah. Lich's lawyer Lawrence Greenspan argued the two organizers did nothing more than shake hands and pose for a photo together at the gala hosted by the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, where she received a Freedom Award for her role during the convoy. During the occupation.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, well, this is global news, so,
It's
consider the
news,
source.
yeah.
So, Goodman said the Justice of the Peace, Paul Harris, had made erroneous conclusions and misapprehended the evidence against Lich while deciding that she broke her bail conditions. She'll be released on Tuesday. After spending more than 48 days in jail, she faces charges of mischief, obstructing police, counseling others to commit mischief, and intimidation. That's not worth 48 days in jail. We've talked about this over and over. We're glad that she's released on bail, and then she has another court appearance for Thursday. But she should never have spent a moment in jail, and she spent 48 days. We just talked about the Pavlovskis, and they're getting some recompense. They should get more than $15,000 by quite a large sum from the government. I doubt that they'll get it, but they should.
Well, they actually have the ability to sue the government.
Oh, they should.
Because of the way that the court ruling found their actions illegal. They can be. So, I mean, normally I don't I think avoid frivolous lawsuits or things like that. But
this is not frivolous.
In this case, it's not even about the money.
Yep.
It's more
about making a statement.
Well, it's more about holding those accountable.
Yep.
Who are accountable, because the same idea. You don't want this to be done to other people. Okay, so if you're a Christian, let's say you're a Christian woman, you got raped. It's if you were asked do you want to press charges? It's oh no, I'm a Christian.
I forgive. It's I forgive.
No,
but justice must be served.
Yeah,
we've talked about this, and the Bible is very clear on this. There is a difference between justice and vengeance.
Yes.
Vengeance, of course, is personal. Justice is for the good of all.
That's right.
And so, yes, if Tamara Lich was if she was saying, yep, the government put me in jail for 48 days, we should burn down, that would be vengeance. Mm-hmm. It would be inappropriate. Yep. But if she says, yes, I am what the government did to me was wrong. Yep. Mm-hmm. And I am going to go after them. I'm going to go after them for suing them for wrongful arrest, wrongful detainment, and illegal proceedings. Or I'm not exactly certain on the law because I'm not a lawyer. But she has every decent grounds to go after them. And both her, the Pawlowskis, Tim Stevens, our pastor, James Coates up in Edmonton, and a few others across the country should be actively seeking litigation against the governments. And the people of those provinces should be actively seeking litigation against the public health authorities, the premiership, and those who made the decisions to lock us up, to condemn us, to segregate us, and to make sure that this is much worse than it would have been if we had done nothing.
Yeah, one thing I always like to say about, like, you know, so if you think of, like, you know, Kenny did all these things, like, look at it this way. If you're a doctor, or I don't know, like, okay, I'm going to put it really simply. There are people today that would have been alive that are dead now because of them. Now, if anybody died because of the virus, I actually don't put that on Kenny.
Nope.
I wouldn't put that on Hinshaw. I wouldn't put the virus is going to kill whoever it wants.
Yes.
And, you know, like, viruses are very...
And it's going to spread however it wants.
It's going to spread however it wants. However, you're not responsible for what a virus does. Even though people like to say, like, oh, you're causing people to die. I'm like, give me a break. It's a virus. However, you are responsible for the actions you take that directly lead to people dying, including there was a story here in Alberta of a father who got delayed a surgery because of these onerous, irresponsible, and totally unscientific policies. He died waiting for that transplant.
Yep.
Just one example. And there are dozens and dozens and dozens of more people who died by suicide, by vaccines, or by whatever other kind of thing happened, that these people are responsible. These people have blood on their hands. They're like, you know, like, what do you call it? They're basically like Pontius Pilate in the Gospels, who basically said, like, oh,
I wash my hands of this.
I wash my hands. I am innocent of this blood. I'm like, no, you're not. You basically let them to die. So
yeah, you allowed it.
Yeah. So there's a reason why we want accountability. We don't want vengeance. I don't want Kenny to be like, you know, like, I don't know, hit by some assassin like the guy in New York.
Yeah.
But I do want him to face some jail time because what he did was terribly criminal. So,
it was explicitly criminal.
I'm excited, but I'm seriously excited that Tamara Lich is out. I'm excited that
Pawlowski's got recompense.
I feel like they've really gotten a bad rap not only by the government, but a lot of, like, local Christians unfairly treated them like garbage, including that one pastor, remember? One from First Alliance.
Yep.
Ray, whatever his name was, Pastor Ray, that went on the Calgary Herald and basically, you know, threw them under the bus. And I was like, what the crap, man? What the crap? And so I think it's great that the Pawlowskis are basically getting, you know, vindicated.
Yep.
They should. So good news, like, end on. We're hoping that this continues.
Yes, 100%.
Hey,
all right,
Stephen.
So that's where we're going to end today's show. Thank you for watching.
Aww.
Thank you for listening. Well, you'll see us again Thursday, so shush. So, if you've been watching on our video platforms such as YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, and YouTube, then do not forget to like, follow, comment, subscribe. It feeds the algorithm of the big tech overlords, which we fight to overcome.
The overlords.
Yep. Meanwhile, at the Legion of YouTube. Censorious bastards.
Yeah, pretty much. That's the way it works.
So, all of that helps us out. Give us comments. We'll respond to as many as we can as long as they're reasonable and not racist. Watching you, BitChute. You know what you're doing. Every bloody time. Anyways.
One job, BitChute. One job.
One bloody job. Facebook. Yeah, if you're following us on our text platforms such as Facebook, Gitter, Twitter, and Parler, then of course, comment, like, follow, echo. It's different for every platform, but if you're on those platforms, you know what you should do.
That's right. You should know.
And then, of course, if you're listening on our podcast platforms, then, of course, download this video and share it with your friends because we think we're nice. Yay.
Yeah.
All right. To finish off, of course, on Thursday, we are actually going to have Cameron Cote come on. It's going to be a bit of an earlier show. So we're going to start at about 7 p.m. We're going to have a discussion with him from 7 till 8. And then we're going to finish off the latter section with kind of a normal show segment. Unless we have another guest, which maybe, I don't know. We might. Hopefully.
We'll see.
We'll see.
Hopefully.
We would love to have somebody join Cam because Cam is great.
Yeah, Kim was great.
So that'll be the show Thursday. It's going to just mark it in your calendar. That's going to be an hour earlier. That being said, here at the Shrewd Dudes podcast, we always like to remind you, why be rude when you can be shrewd. Have a great night, everybody. We will see you on Thursday for our live stream. And have a great night. And as always, God bless.
Good night, everybody.